Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Michaela Kerrison, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Guri Singh. This evening, we are honoured to acknowledge Mr. Mark Brewer, Acting Deputy President, Veteran Experience and Transition, Department of Veterans Affairs, accompanied by Mr. Tim Bayliss, Director of War Graves, Department of Veterans Affairs. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Applecross Senior High School, Ardross, Western Australia. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Captain Frank Amphlett. Frank Amphlett was born on the 25th of December, 1876, in St. Leonards, New South Wales. He was one of 9 children born to Captain Edward Albert Amphlett of the Royal Navy and his wife, Mary Amphlett. Frank was educated at 4th Street School and later Sydney Public High School. He spent most of his life in the suburbs of Sydney. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Amphlett was working as a wool auctioneer. Frank Amphlett enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 20th of January 1916. He applied for and was granted a commission and was assigned to the newly raised 35th Battalion with the rank of lieutenant. After a short period of training, he embarked for active service, sailing from Sydney in May 1916 on board the troop ship Benalla. Lieutenant Amphlett arrived in Plymouth, England on the 9th of July and proceeded to camp to continue training. During this period, he met an Australian woman named Ella Rose Ryrie, and they were soon married in London, suburb of Paddington. Amphlett returned to camp, where he was promoted to the rank of captain. In November 1916, his battalion began their journey to France, arriving on the Western Front just in time to spend a bitterly cold winter in the trenches. In early 1917, Amphlett was sent to the 2nd Army School of Instruction. He remained away from his unit until May 1917, when he rejoined the 35th Battalion in Belgium. Within weeks of his return to the front, Amphlett was drawn into the fighting at Messines Ridge. Afterwards, he and his men spent time defending gains made during the attack, combined with training and resting behind the lines. On the 12th of October 1917, Amphlett and his comrades returned to the front lines to take part in an attack to capture the strategically significant village of Passchendaele, just 10 kilometers east of Ypres. Located high upon the ridge, their objective involved many difficulties. Despite being preceded by days of heavy rain, the battle went ahead in the early hours of the morning in appalling muddy conditions. Lance Corporal Murray, who was also in the fighting, described the scene as follows. At 5:45 a.m., our guns opened up with a barrage. When I heard the rattle and roar, I felt like crying. I knew that the boys were going forward in semi-darkness. Scores of our guns were buried in the mud, and they were useless. While it was impossible to get ammunition to others, and they could not fire a shot. The big guns were too far back and could not get up any closer, owing to the bad state of ground. Scores of Fritz's strong points contained machine guns, too. During the early hours of the morning, we got into the village, but had to retire to within 300 yards of our starting point. All night long, the strafing continued, while we lay in shell holes in the slush, mud, and the rain. Several times I went up to my hips in mud, and never in less than to the tops of my boots. I am certain, without exaggeration, I was bogged to the hips 50 times at least, and crawling out of that knocks it out of a chap. Our stunt was hell while it lasted. By the time the attacking force had withdrawn, Australian units alone had suffered some 38,000 casualties since the offensive had begun back in July. Among the dead was Captain Frank Amphlett, who was killed by an enemy sniper just as he and his men reached their objective. One of Ampflett's comrades later wrote, "I can say without fear that Amphlett was loved by his men. His first thought was for their comfort and safety. At times when I was in the lines, I have come across him getting around, trying to locate the enemy guns at all hours of the day and night. He always had a cheery word for his men and was always inquiring as to their comfort. He was a grand man, a man among men." Ampflett's final resting place was never located. Today he is commemorated on the Meningate Memorial for the Missing in Ypres, Belgium. Captain Frank Amphlett was 40 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honor on my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Frank Amphlett, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If you are able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.